Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders, so let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
The Jamodi Podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
In your opinion, how does culture drive the performance of your team?
And that's a great question, and we talk about it a lot, and rightfully so. You know, the first thing I would say is talent matters. Obviously, we all understand that at the end of the day, if I got the best players, then I have the best chance to win. And so I don't think, talking about culture, I don't think is ignoring those facts. One thing I have told young coaches, you can't be talent addicted. I can't be so addicted to talent that when the talent becomes an issue, when they're hurting my culture, that I'm not willing to make it, one, hold them accountable, but two, if it gets to the point where they're refusing to be held accountable, that I'm not willing to make a change. And so, those are things that come to mind when I'm thinking about talent. But for me, how does culture drive performance? I think culture is the difference in adversity. One benefit of culture would be is during times of adversity, you really kind of find out who you are. What's the Mike Tyson saying? Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going down the road, but how do I handle a little adversity? How do I handle when things don't go my way? How do I handle when a snowstorm, at least in Amarillo, a snowstorm hits and all of a sudden we're playing Friday and Saturday and we don't get those days in between or something like that. I think culture can be the big difference in times of adversity. And then it's a difference in being consistent. The old Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare. The talent, the hare is going to win if the hare is on point. But when talent takes a break, when talent has a gap during the course of the game, my culture can be consistent for the 32 minutes that can now overcome maybe a talent gap. And so when I think of how culture drives performance, I just think it makes me more consistent and it allows me to handle adversity a little bit better.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money with that. And you said something about the 32 minutes that your team can be consistent. And I do want to get into a little bit of the defensive mentality that you have. And then I don't know if it was Coach Langford or maybe I read it, but I think it was Coach Langford that mentioned floor burn high. And as you guys being known for that, how does the culture you're talking about especially drive that defensive mentality that you guys have?
No, it's, floor burn high is kind of what we've adopted as who we are. And obviously that's talking about getting on the floor for a loose ball, getting floor burns, taking charges. But it's so much more than that. During COVID, we weren't allowed, we're up here in Amarillo in the middle of nowhere, and we're 5.5 hours from the Metroplex. And so our tournaments are huge for us as far as, wanting to see a different level, a different pace of play and things like that. So we always take a couple trips at least to play in tournaments. Well, during COVID, those weren't happening, and we couldn't spend the night. And so we got on a bus in Amarillo, drove 6 hours to South Dallas and played number 1 Lancaster on their court, and then got on the bus and drove home and did that like 3 times with Waxahachie, Hinsfield, Lake Ridge, and Lancaster. And one of them, I think the Waxahachie or Lancaster trip, I mean, we did that. Then we got back, at like 1 in the morning, and we were back up there at 10 a.m. for practice. And we finished practice, and one of the kids was like, "Coach, man, like we drove 12 hours yesterday to play one basketball game. Got back at midnight or 1 a.m., and we're up here in the morning practicing for burn high." Just making that understanding of, hey, it's more than just getting a loose ball. It's just we're gonna, if something goes wrong, advantage us. If everything's perfect, advantage us. That we're not going to make excuses. And so I think that. That accountability kind of builds into your culture, and just, we want to be the most mentally tough together, willing to do whatever it takes within the rules to be successful. That pretty much kind of is what Floorburn High is to us.
Love that. I think in college I would have, if the player I was in college was playing for you in high school, I think I would have really enjoyed that, because that was kind of the when the talent isn't the same. Like my teammates were way better than me. You sometimes got to figure out a way, like, how are we going to survive? How can I fill or shorten that gap? And a big part is be willing to do more, go harder, and give up your body more than the other guy is. And so I love that, man.
No, and you just brought it up. Like, as far as a player goes, we'll have, it seems like every year there's going to be one kid that's a senior that is extremely valuable to our team, that isn't a scorer, isn't a creator, but he exemplifies Floorburn High, and he's an elite ball getter. He's a great rebounder. He's a defensive stopper. And so that culture has allowed us to have some kids that are program guys that develop later on, that all of a sudden hit a little growth spurt as a junior, and now they're able to be used. And so, yeah, you said it.
That's a really good point, because I think the danger is if our culture or what we value mainly is what they can do with the ball in their hands. And those are typically the guys that maybe score the most and have the ball, set up actions and all those things, and are maybe the most creative. But if the whole program knows that that is really all that's valued, it may be hard to have that culture that you're talking about. Culture that there needs to be something that every player can show value in these ways. So Kenny Bourne, great coach at Flower Mound Marcus, and one of the big defensive mind behind their state championship games, wins, and their teams at Flower Mound Marcus. And I had to talk with him, and he said, man, the best way to get that culture going is to win. And there is something too, like, you want buy-in, and with what you're selling, what you're telling your teams, then does it help them win or be competitive? But that's not possible all the time, especially maybe if you're in a rebuild, or it's just a year where graduate a really good group and this group's just different. We have to find ways, one, how can every day be a win? I think that has to deal with culture, but ways that all of them can bring value, and look at what the standards that you have and say, yes, I can do that. If the standards are, I have to score 20, that's our culture, is that I have to be able to do this and that I have to be able to. I just think you're going to lose guys like that. And your culture may go up and down from year to year with your level of wins or success you have.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think last year, we had a stretch where I had I had Zach Brown and Braden Haas ended up being all-state kids for us. And during the month of December, Braden fractured a finger and Zach had a knee issue, and they both missed a month. And so we're playing the month of December without our best two players, and really good players. I mean, they're going to be college basketball, or will be college basketball players. And we're going down to Allen, and we got Beaumont United, which I got all the respect in the world for those guys, and they're really talented. And so we're playing these guys, and I've got guys that aren't used to being the frontline guys, and we take them down to the wire. It's a 2-point game, and it's probably one of my proudest moments is that we found a way, the whole next man up philosophy. But that goes from even we want to win the bench every game.
Yeah.
We want our bench to be as engaged, as helpful, as enthusiastic as any bench. And so we've had moments in film where, a guy doesn't block out. That's probably going to be a clip. A guy has a defensive breakdown, that you're probably going to see that in a clip. But if I'm watching film and something important happens and I got two guys standing up and other guys sitting on the bench, or just one guy, that's a clip. That's a film. And we're talking about those things. Like we've had those meetings with players and talked about roles, and like, you've accepted this role. I mean, this is the role I've offered you. You've accepted it. I expect you to excel in it. And so those are all the things that go into it. We all want to talk about it, but at the end of the day, when I'm crossing that boundary, when I'm not meeting that standard of being the best on the bench as possible, am I being held accountable? And those are things that we're trying to do on a daily.
Shaka Smart said that they want to be the most enthusiastic team that they play all year long. So I think that's a goal for us. Enthusiasm is one of our standards. And I think, what's one way that we could be undefeated this year, fellas? Because we don't ever talk about that. In fact, our first talk of the year is about what are we going to do when we lose? That's our first meeting in season. What are we going to do when we lose? How's culture going to break down, or how are we going to keep it from breaking down? And some people, I got that from Doug Novak, because I think that's kind of counter to what most teams we start, or most seasons we start with, like, here's the plan to state. Here's the plan to win district. Here's the plan. Awesome if those things happen, but we're rarely going to be undefeated, and we got to be ready. But I think we can be undefeated, fellas, and having the most enthusiastic bench. And let's pride ourselves on that. That is completely under our control. I think that's, again, it's where, and it's not just for the guys on the floor, not just for the guys that don't play, but here's what I thought about, Coach. How often do we hold us, like you and me, to that standard? Do we want them to be enthusiastic, and then I'm scowling and I look upset the whole time and I look pissed off? I'm upset with officials. Like, how often are we doing things that are counter to the culture that we're asking our players?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's where those truth tellers in the office with you matter. You know, I mean, am I creating a staff that those guys feel like they can speak up and, you know, and let me know those type of things. And so, no, I'm with you. I think that's a great point.
One thing I thought about too is and you kind of mentioned, when talent is all that we value, if that's the most important thing, I think that is when, and obviously when, like, I always like that about Duke, is I feel like they get really good players, but then really high character guys too. I mean, not just Duke, but some other schools do that. At the high school level, we don't always have the luxury of knowing who's going to be there, or especially nowadays. And so I think a good way to learn about not valuing talent too high or more than anything else is those stories that have already been out there. You know, the 30 for these, or the interview, or the kind of the scandals that we see out there, where most of the time it's because, I mean, I was thinking of the Swamp, right? Isn't that the 30 for 30 about Florida with Urban Meyer and them, and the success? But man, they were taking guys with known character issues, but because they were so good, they were compromising. They did win and have success, but what's the cost? And then, you know, Shawnee Harley talks about choosing your hard. You got to choose your hard, and choosing to have character guys sometimes over the talent, man, that's hard. But so is having the talent, but then compromising on maybe your values or your culture, right?
Oh, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, I got to sleep at night. I got to be able to put my head down on the pillow. And it kind of goes back to something I mentioned earlier. Like, you can't be talent addicted. I mean, I want the best players. I'm obviously first and foremost. But at the end of the day, my experience has been, if somewhere down the road, it's going to come back and bite me. And unfortunately, it's probably going to bite me at the worst of times. And so we're going to go ahead and try to deal with this on the daily. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'm with you. I mean, character is, I can at least enjoy my job. Maybe I got kids of great character. And here's the other thing. If I have a room full, if I have a locker room full of high character guys, when I get a kid that's maybe marginal, or a kid that maybe comes in and doesn't have the experience with making the best choices, he has a better chance in a locker room of high character guys. Yeah. And so I have a responsibility, you know, because some of the counter to that would be like, oh, well, you're just going to give up on a kid that has it. No, we never going to just kick a kid out the door the first time. We're going to walk through we're going to hold them accountable. There's going to be consequences for your actions, but I'm going to create an environment that even the toughest of kids, when they come into it, they either want to adapt, and that'll help change and influence them, or they're like, this isn't for me, and they're going to go find trouble somewhere else. And so I think it gives all kids the best opportunity when you can create a program that has built on character.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.